Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my Daily Dose with Tim. Today is season 2, episode 56. And today, what we're going to cover is something that we call the real estate cycle. Now, I understand that there's always, like everything else, have a lot of different school of thoughts. So I do want to tell you that I am going to be piecing quite a few different pieces together, kind of string them together to hopefully make this make more sense because honestly, this actually took me quite a long time to grasp when I was first started to learn how to leverage real estate as a money-making vehicle because as you guys know, cash flow is king. I don't just purchase properties or acquire properties and buy, rent, and pray and hoping that one day I'm just gonna sit on all that equity, right? So here is my interpretation of the real estate cycle, and there will be 3 very major graphs coming your way. So the reason I'm telling you this is number 1, I am not the best at drawing. Going through school, even now, I don't play Pictionary, and if I do, stick figures is probably still my go-to. So bear with me as I draw things out. However, the more important part really, I mean, that was a semi-joke for you. However, it is true. I'm not a very good drawer. But the main point really here is that if you would like to have your phone ready so you can take pictures to capture the graphs, or if you want to just grab a pen and paper for yourself so that you can follow along, because I understand that for many, many of us, including myself, when I'm actually copying down graphs and notes the same time as I'm absorbing the materials, I usually tend to keep a little bit more as well. So here we go. The first thing that I'm going to share with you is something that looks like this. So graph number 1. Okay, what we're going to do is this. And just FYI, I'm going to be going through 3 different pages on this today, just to illustrate everything. Okay, so 3 different pages. Now, the first one is this. So right here, I mean, I guess when we went to school, this was called the XY axis, right? And so right here, we also have value. Okay, so remember, this is a value. So in layman's term, really, this is price. And so a lot of the times, most people tend to think that real estate prices, depending on the market that you are in, tends to go this way. It just slowly goes up. And while in most markets that tends to be true, in some markets it may not be. And this is why we always emphasize on the point of learning different strategies so that you can continue to make money, protect yourselves, and build long-term wealth, whether or not the market's going up, going down, or even going sideways for a few months or even a few years here. I understand COVID kind of changed a lot of the norms here. However, that's exactly why I want to cover this. And frankly, the reason why I'm covering this is because a lot of you guys have requested, or more so through your questions, this is really the answer that I'm coming up with, which is really helping you understand the real estate cycle a little bit better. So a lot of the questions can be answered automatically through this. So right here, I'm going to add something called the real estate cycle. Let's put it that way. So really what's happening is the markets tend to go like this a little bit because everything is cyclical. What goes up must come down. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. It's night and it turns the day, all that kind of things. Everything is cyclical, okay? Nothing escapes that. And so for us to blindly think that the market is just going to go up in a straight line, that is definitely false. However, the main point is if you look at the brown line right here, it kind of has that wavy thing. It goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down. I'm not even going to tell you exactly how long of a period this is because again, it could still vary based on the market. And a lot of the times it could vary based on government policies, which is a whole different topics in terms of how every single government really stimulates their own economy through real estate. Okay, that would be a lot of different factors coming into play here. Regardless, that's what contributes to the ups and downs in the real estate market. Now, first thing first, I do want to just kind of burst that bubble for some of you guys right off the bat. I don't even know if that's actually the right phrase here. Again, it's been a while now. So the point is, a lot of us, we always hear about, oh my God, this market is going through into, it is definitely in a bubble. The Canadian real estate market is in a bubble. The US real estate is in a bubble. Or even it could be broken down into a specific province, a specific city also. Now, when do you see the bubble? That's the thing. I mean, it's a catchphrase, it's a buzzword that so many people use all the time. But really, where is that bubble? Well, let's see. If the straight line up, okay, is what we call the average, okay? The average, let's just say market appreciation, okay? Appreciation. And the thing about market appreciation could come from so many, average market appreciation can come from so many different factors. And the biggest reason, frankly, is inflation. Obviously, we understand the concept of demand and supply as well. Now, the biggest thing about all of this, though, is that if the straight line is the average, then the bubbles really is whenever there are these little lumps that are not touching the line directly. So you can see now, what's the bubble? Those are the little bubbles that exist along that average market appreciation line. So guess what? Stop getting jerked around with media reports because we are in bubbles more often than we are not. And the funny thing is, so many media outlets don't even talk about the bubbles that are below the line unless it's really big and really bad, i.e. the year 2020, the year we just had. Initially, because of COVID, most cities, most markets, most countries that we know of, real estate value dropped, demand stopped. Why? Because so many people stopped working, and that we're going to go into at the later part of this video as well. So brace yourself, it's going to be a bit of a longer one because I really want to make sure that everybody gets this. Okay, so okay, you don't want me to continue to color now, but you sort of get the idea. Okay, you sort of get the idea that we're really in bubbles way more than when we are not. So stop letting the word bubble dictate how you purchase, or if you purchase, or even when you purchase. So understanding that concept now, well, let's take a little snapshot now, okay? Technically speaking, this is, oopsie, let me come back to that a little bit. Okay, so here is the part where it intersects. So you will see that this is technically a full cycle that we speak of. So now I'm going to go into graph number 2. So graph number 2 now really is, this is the, whoa, see, I told you it's not even a straight line. However, I think we're going to be okay, right? We're going to be okay, and we can live with this. So the average market appreciation, and then you now know this is rate. So in some market, it could be 1%, could be 2%, could be 5%, could be 10%. And depending on the timeline that you're giving it, that number could also change. However, we're always focusing on the most fundamental basics theory of it all. So what this means now is you're going to have a cycle like this. Now, depending on where you are, I will share this with you for most Canadian cities. I don't know why there's not. Let me redo this. Okay, so if you can help me out here, just see those as straight lines, because on a writing pad, it's actually kind of hard to do this. Usually on a flip chart, I might be able to make that work a little bit better. Now, this entire time frame, okay, is what we call a full cycle. A full cycle. And a full cycle, typically in a North American city, is anywhere between 7 to 11 years. Is anywhere between 7 to 11 years. So wherever you are right now, kind of think about whether or not that time frame fits the market that you live in. I'm not asking you to analyze any other markets or even your whole country, okay? Just think about whether or not that actually fits, because that typically is the way it goes within a North American market. So my friends, if you're in Asia, if you're in Australia, in Europe somewhere, this may not be applicable to you. However, if it does, great. If not, frankly, the time frame of a full cycle is not the most important thing you need to know, because we're going to touch on that in graph number 3 later. However, as a professional and educated real estate investor, why is this so important? Because way too many people, like I said earlier, just buy, rent, and pray. And so what that really means is that those people tend to do this, or by doing this, I mean acquire properties like they would going to a casino. It's gambling. It's gambling, because let's just say that if I buy something for $500,000 today and I basically just self-manage for the next 20, 30 years, and then I'm going to go through all the headaches and all the hassles of finding tenants, maintaining tenants, and making sure that, well, making sure for the most part we can do that. However, you never ever know. You basically hope and pray that your tenants will take care of your property really well, and also the fact that they never trash it and always pay on time. And let's just say that over the span of 30 years, when you're waiting for that mortgage paid down while you work your assets off somewhere else at a job and having no freedom and getting stressed and getting health challenges. Again, I'm only saying that because that is something that I see so much, and I did go through that. It's just that I went through that at a very, very young age, and that's really what gave me the inspiration to make sure that I really learn how money works and learn how to leverage real estate as my vehicle. So I digress once again. The point is, I want to make sure that when you are looking at this graph, first thing first, what you want to write down here is when the market is going up. And this is typically what we call the brick and mortar stage. Brick and mortar stage basically means that we are going to be buying, actively buying and acquiring. Okay, actively buying and acquiring properties, meaning, hey, we can go on title. That's fine. We don't have to go on title. If you're doing joint ventures or leveraging other people's money, doesn't matter. The idea is that this is when we are in acquisition mode and we want to buy brick and mortar. Now, I'm going to draw a line right here and right there as well. Now, what is this line? Well, we always say that that line is where the masses come into play, the speculators being the masses. Why? Because these are the guys that actually, guys and gals, doesn't matter. There is no gender difference in this case, but this is where the amateurs actually all flock into the market. And so when do we stop acquiring, or when do we stop buying brick and mortar? Well, this line tells you. And how can we tell when that line is happening? The quick answer, frankly, is when you cannot turn the TV on, listen to a podcast with some ads, or you're browsing somewhere, or watching the news without hearing things like the market is extremely hot. Okay, this is when, remember, masses, meaning when mass media is blasting the exact same message. That's getting all the speculators into the game. And this is why you will see that this period is actually quite short, and it's a very small chunk, because what that means now is the more volume of people that come into the market, the less there is to share amongst each other now. However, what that's also going to create is the fact that once it plateaus, it's going to turn around. Remember, everything is cyclical. Now, when it's coming down, Most people won't know what to do with it. However, professional investors, what we end up doing now is this is what we call the paper or even the creative phase. Okay, so paper asset or creative phase, because the idea is to be able to control without owning, controlled without owning. Okay, now, so many different ways we can look at this because this is simple. Money plus qualifications. So traditional lending, easy, easy. We can make that work. Just buy, because the market's going up, lenders are confident, and most people are still making good money. The economy is doing well. Those are usually the indicators. So no problem whatsoever. However, it's when the market is coming down. This is when we have to start to get a little bit more creative by being able to pool other people's money together. And other people's money, once again, can still be traditional lending, or it can be unconventional, and it can be private. Okay. And so the other way to look at it is when it comes to private, probably not 3. I'm just going to say this is going to be a 2.1 kind of idea. Under the private umbrella, you can not just think about OPM, because we're thinking about strategies like agreement for sale, seller financing, okay, I mean SF, single family, seller financing, or even the option to purchase. Not offer to purchase, option to purchase. Okay, I'm abbreviating everything just so that it's a lot easier to follow along and you're not waiting for me to write something out here. So the idea is this is where really the real money is made. Not quite sure if everybody's heard of the phrase or sort of the concept that there are more millionaires created in a downturn or in a recession than when the economy is doing well. And that's exactly why. Because trained and educated investors understand how to capitalize on opportunities in every single market. And this is why you've probably heard friends or families or even colleagues saying things like, oh my God, I wish I actually bought a property 20 years ago in my hometown, or even 10 years ago, depending on where you're at. And that's exactly why, because when the market was going down, nobody wants to touch it. And they may even have heard of stories about how people got burned because they bought something, for example, for $500,000, let's say at this point. And all of a sudden, when you're hearing that story, that property is worth $350,000 and they're not cash flowing. However, every single month, they still got a debt service. In a way, they're working their butts off if they still have a job and still have to pay extra to go and and make up for the difference on the payment to maintain that rental property that is going to give them the long-term wealth. Well, guess what? The long-term wealth already just got caught up by 30% in value, and you're in trouble. And this is where, again, the opportunities come in for a lot of the other investors who understand how to solve other people's problems. Okay, that might be a whole other video altogether, but I want everybody to understand that this is really the real estate cycle between the uptrend and the downtrend and what happens in between and how you can navigate through it. Okay. Now at the bottom here, I understand because earlier here we talked about when does this point happen is when you hear it from the mass media, is when you hear it from the mass media. Now, when does this point happen is a lot of the times what we want to know. Okay. And this is same idea. When you hear from mass media saying things like the market is seeing signs of recovery, the government and private business sectors are now gaining confidence and reinvesting back into the community, or that better yet, the local governments are investing in the infrastructure. Okay, whenever you see the government spending money, more often than not, it's actually during a recession. Because what? Every contract is slightly cheaper for the government to achieve. As taxpayers, everyone should be quite happy about that. And at the same time, it's win-win because it's also the government's way, typically speaking, to stimulate the economy through construction and building infrastructure. However, as you can see, there is no guarantee in that case. This is why that point, after that point, it could still dip for a little bit until the overall confidence in the economy bounces back to drive up the real estate cycle once again. And so now we're going to go into the third and the last graph for today, which really is the real estate cycle indicators. Okay, so I'm going to use an uptrend real estate cycle graph. Okay, that's meant to be a bit of a curve, just so you know. So I'm going to use an uptrend curve as an indicator here and sort of share with you some of the components, the indicators that would help you identify at which point of the real estate cycle in your market or in the markets that you're actively investing or acquiring properties in would show. Okay, so now I'm going to change that to a different color first of all. Now, the first thing that we want to look out for is always our GDP growth. Now, this is not an Econ 101 course, so the extent of GDP, I'm just going to tell you that stands for gross domestic product growth. If you want further definitions or just want to understand a little bit more, make sure you Google it. So GDP growth is usually the first thing that we look for. And how do we look for that? We can subscribe to a lot of the economists or the banks report on their economic outlooks. A lot of the times your realtors and their brokerage offices also have newsletters that will actually share those information as well. And if all else fails, once again, mass media will always talk about the GDP growth when it happens as well. And now the next point is when the GDP growth, this might be a little easier now, is it will drive job growth. Okay, so if you even just think about growth domestic product, that means at the very minimum, the economy is producing once again. So in order for the economy to get going, to continue to produce and increase production, it needs a labor force. And this is why the job growth immediately follows a GDP growth, typically speaking. Okay. And then the next step now that we're going to look at is once the job growth is there, well, guess what? That means the population is likely going to grow because what's going to happen is the existing job pool is going to be so much bigger than what the current workforce is going to handle. So meaning more jobs than manpower. Okay. I always have trouble saying that word because to me, it's an old word. Anyways, let's not go there. Population growth follows immediately after job growth, which is a very, very good thing. And then what I want to really let everybody know here is that typically speaking though, okay, in most markets, especially in urban markets, okay, especially in urban markets, that is usually about a 12-month period, typically speaking. Okay, once again, time frame isn't the most crucial thing just because it does vary so much. However, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understand how this cycle works and how the indicators build on top of each other. Okay, so now after we've experienced population growth, well, guess what? There's more people coming in, which means there is now going to be an increase rental demand. Because guess what? People that typically move into a brand new market for a job, they don't oftentimes buy something right off the bat. So they're going to rent first. And that's why there's a rental demand. And they might turn into just long-term renters or they might turn into buyers. And As a result, I mean, this next part is fairly straightforward because it's sort of a mirror of rental demand, increased rental demand, which is a decrease inventory. So decrease vacancies, okay? So decrease inventories in rental properties. And overall, though, what that's going to mean is demand and supply. When that happens, what's going to happen now is increase in rent amounts. Increase in rent amounts. So once again, depending on the market that you're in a Canadian urban area, typically speaking, after job growth to this part, it can take another 6 to 18 months right there, typically speaking. Okay, it can take another 6 to 18 months right there. Now let's keep going. We're not done yet. So like we said, when you have an increased rental demand, decreased vacancies, an example, you get elevated rent. And this is when people start to go, rent keeps going up, 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 up. And it seems like property value is going up as well, because like I said earlier, people that move, sometimes they will buy, but most of the times they don't right away. But this is also when people really jump into the market and start acquiring properties as well. So we're going to say that the demand to purchase property, okay, increased demand in property purchase happens right here, okay? And then overall, once that happens, we can see the increase in property value. All right, so there you have it. And that's why this is the point. If you go back to the previous slide, this is where when the mass media start to go, oh my God, the market is so hot. You can buy something for $100,000 today and flip it for 110 every single day. It's like a bloodbath. Everybody's overbidding each other. And so I think if you're in certain markets right now, you understand exactly what I mean by that. So there you have it. Once again, thank you so much for joining me on this particular episode of my Daily Dose with Tim. As you know, really, this is my passion project. I really want to share how to be a professional and really educated investors, because ultimately it's about securing your finances and your financial future and protection. The more you know, the better you can protect your money now and for the rest of your lives, and maybe even for your kids and for your kids' kids to come. And so with that said, live well, everybody, and I will see you at the next episode.